So welcome back, everyone. Let's begin by doing a brief recap of our session. It was all about the X factor, right, Glen? Intuitivity.
The X factor. Now, there's a good reason I call it the X factor, Michelle, because it is just, and I think people have this kind of view that if something's an X factor, it's really extraordinary, it's amazing, and it's something that we should pay attention to, and preferably it's something that we should take advantage of, right? And so that's why I called intuition the X factor. And I really mean it in that way. I'm kind of saying to people who are watching this right now, pay attention to this, because this is something that you have, and something that we know, from childhood has really been suppressed out of us. I certainly know in my corporate career, whenever I used or referred to my intuition or my intuitivity, I've made that word up, by the way. It's a great word, right? It's been suppressed. People have kind of looked at me and gone, that doesn't cut it here. We kind of need numbers. We need data, metadata, big data, or little data, whatever data you've got to substantiate, the point of view that you've got, so we can make a decision. And in many respects, every time they did that, I used to think, you're just covering your ass, really, because you can say, well, the data said this. With intuitivity, there's nothing there to substantiate it. It's this kind of sense of knowingness. And for me, intuition really is all about that. You can call it the gut feeling, you can call it an instinctive understanding or an instinctive knowingness, this just sense of knowingness. How do you know? Well, I don't know. And the thing that I think about, the way I've kind of, shuffled this around in my mind, my understanding is, intuition is the antithesis of dead thinking. It's actually live thinking. And so what is dead thinking? And I, in the last video, you would have heard me refer to Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's a neuroscientist, one of my favorite guys. I love reading all his books. I love watching his videos. He's one of my favorite people in terms of neuroscience and quantum physics, really. And so Joe Dispenza talks about the fact that we, every day we have 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and 95% of those thoughts are repetitive, which means we're thinking the same 95% of the time. We're thinking the same thoughts we thought yesterday. Now, I refer to that as dead thinking. That just keeps us stuck, thinking the same things, doing the same things day after day after day. You can call it the hamster wheel. You can call it Groundhog Day, whatever you want to call it. It's not the place that we as humans need to be. Certainly not humans are becoming awake and aware. And I think those that, are rising out of this, suppressed lower version of ourselves, really, where we haven't utilized our incredible intuitive powers. Those that are rising out of this are developing their intuitive thinking. And so what's intuitive thinking? Well, it's the opposite of dead thinking. It's live thinking. And it's live thinking that is new ideas. It's kind of like live thinking that akins to your personal truth, And so now I want to define, allow people to understand what my definition of intuition is. And certainly you won't find it in any books anywhere. It's not something I've copied from anybody. It's something that I believe is what intuition really is from all my research. And I've done extensive research, by the way. And so I believe intuition is your ability to interpret the language of the non-conscious mind. Now, you'll notice I call it the non-conscious mind, not the unconscious. There's nothing unconscious about this mind that we're talking about. It's not the subconscious. There's nothing sub about it. It's actually the mind that actually controls everything, all perception and behavior. 96 to 98% of all perception and behavior comes from that non-conscious mind. And so the definition is the ability to interpret the language of the non-conscious mind. Now, what is that language? Well, the language is emotions. That's why we call it a gut feeling. The language is feelings. It's kind of this ultra sensitivity that we have that provides us with this sense of knowingness. It's like I've just had a feeling about something. Well, people who are developing their intuition are starting to decode what that feeling means. Now, it could be something, it could be a feeling about a sense of danger. It could be a feeling about an understanding of what's the right thing to do in a particularly challenging instance or circumstance. It's something like that. And so, when you allow yourself to lower this kind of beta state of mind, this crazy monkey state of mind, and move into an alpha state of mind, or even alpha theta. I prefer alpha theta, which is really quieting the mind down. And even though you're having these 60 or 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day, you're not focusing on them. You're kind of letting them go. You're letting them pass. You're not giving them your attention, right? And so, you're just letting that stuff go by, which means you're quieting your mind down. You're allowing your mind to just be quiet. And when you quiet your mind down in that alpha and theta state, or alpha theta state, what you're doing is you're allowing your intuition to come to the surface, because you haven't got all this interference with all this thinking and, this paying attention to all the thinking. And so you're allowing your intuition to surface. And then once the intuition surfaces and you attach the intuition, which is your personal truth, your feelings about something, to the circumstance that you're in, then you can start to learn how to decode what that means. What's my intuition saying to me? And so, I think this is a particularly important skill, because at the end of the day, your intuition is your non-conscious mind, which, by the way, let me restate this. I said it in the last video, and I do encourage people to go back to that X Factor video and watch it all the way through. Watch it a couple of times, really. It's your ability to listen to this emotional language, these feelings, in the context of the situation you're in, because that's the context that is talking to you, and try and decode it to understand what it's saying to you. Now, I know that people who are really focusing on this and developing this are becoming very intuitive. And, these messages are not just coming from your non-conscious mind, because your non-conscious mind is also connected to the field of all, the quantum field, to the field of all knowingness, the field of all answers. And that includes the Akashic records, which is really the library of everything past, present, and future. And so, imagine being able to develop your intuitive powers to tap in on that. And that's really this process of saying, I'm going to go within to find the truth. And, it's not to say you can't do all your research and all that sort of stuff. And, of course you can do that. But it's about going in and saying, I'm looking for what my truth is. Now, imagine, Michelle, imagine if we had a planet of 8 billion people, which is the population of planet Earth, developing their intuitive powers. They're not going to be so easy to manipulate, are they? They're not going to be so easy to, shift into a state of fear and compliance. I mean, you're just not going to have that, because people are going to be in that, higher vibrational state of intuitivity, of intuiting the answers that are their truth. Yeah. No, I'm making words up all the time here. How good is that? And so, I don't mind. Everybody makes up words. Develop your own language. Why not have fun with it? And so it's this ability to, intuit answers based on the circumstance you're in a way that is best for you, because your intuition always provides answers that are best for you. The only reason people say my intuition doesn't serve me well, what doesn't serve you well is your ability to interpret the language of your non-conscious mind. I mean, you're getting it wrong. And so what does that mean? It means you need to do a bit more work on it and, understand how to do that. And that just requires work. It just requires focus, in my opinion. And so I'm kind of working on this all the time. And now for me, what I'm kind of getting to the point where I have been working on this for years, right? And so now I'm getting to the point where I'll quiet my mind down, get out of beta, get into alpha, get even deeper into those brainwave states, down into theta. And then I'll focus on a problem and just say, well, I'm open to answers. I'm open. I'm calling for answers. I'm interested in answers. I'm open for answers. And then I just allow myself to be, kind of let it go. And what I find is the answers come. You know, I read somewhere that Einstein didn't, create E equals mc squared, the theory of relativity, by using critical thinking or the scientific method. He used to go away from the blackboard. By the way, that was when they had blackboard and chalks in his days, right? He used to walk away from the blackboard. He'd done all the work, but he still didn't have the answer. He'd walk away from the blackboard. And I think he said somewhere that he came up with E equals mc squared when he was playing the violin. And so what he found was that it was music, the resonance of music, that allowed him to attune his mind into his intuition and to allow the answers to come to him. And so for people, that could be music, it could be, connecting with nature, it could be connecting with that vibrational energy of the earth, the vibrational energy of love, those higher vibrational energies. He was playing, I think he played a lot of Baroque music. And so what's Baroque? Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, the three Bs. And so, those guys played a Baroque style music that allowed you to get into alpha, theta state of mind, right? Into a higher state of consciousness. And so he was doing that. And so, listening to Baroque music, classical music that is Baroque, or listening to music that is 528 hertz, which is the vibration of love, 432, 423, I forget which one it is, the vibration 432, the vibrational energy of, the earth, very powerful stuff. And so allowing yourself to do this and then getting out of that, beta state of mind, focusing on the challenge and allowing your intuition to come to you to provide answers, a very powerful thing to do. And that's why I call it the X factor. So how's that for a bit of a summary? I kind of got a bit enthusiastic there. I love this subject.
Yes, it's all great information, and the more we hear it, the more it sinks in and the more we understand it. So that's great. Thank you. So today, Glen, you're going to get into the whole subject of multiplying meaningful action. And I believe you've got some universal brain software for us to do that with, right?
Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Universal brain software. I wish I invented it. I didn't. And so I'll talk about where that stuff comes from. But, this, we're kind of going to get out of, what we've been talking in the past in many respects regarding sovereign conscious leadership, which is the key focus of the collective, right? And so, Brownie, in his wisdom, has steered the collective now into, this idea. It's beyond an idea. It's a practice of being sovereign conscious leaders. And of course, these interview series that you and I are doing, Michelle, is really kind of digging into that subject in a way that's providing education and insights and wisdom to people to be able to do that. And so, what I'm going to do is kind of get out of, some of the more conceptual, theoretical, philosophical videos that we've done in the past and get a lot more pragmatic, right? And so now, this is really where the rubber hits the road. This is, I'm going to talk through, while we call it universal brain software, I'm going to talk through, how to do that, how to problem solve, and better put, how to create multiplying meaningful action. That sounds better, doesn't it? Rather than problem solving, I would much rather create multiple meaningful action than problem solving. And so what is this thing, this universal brain software? Well, it's been created by an Australian guy called Dr. Michael Hewitt Gleason. Now, Michael Hewitt Gleason is still alive. He was the first PhD in lateral psychology, right? Now, where did he get that PhD from? He did that work with Edward de Bono, but I'll talk about him in a minute. And so Dr. Michael Hewitt Gleason is a PhD in lateral psychology. I love it. Lateral thinking, just extraordinary stuff. I love doing that. Lateral as opposed to linear. And we're brought up to be linear thinkers, think straight, right? Left brain thinking, kind of sequential, logical, systematic, numeric. That's left brain. That's linear thinking. throw out linear thinking. That's not what we want to do. And so that's why I'm talking about Michael Hewitt Gleason, lateral thinking, right? He's also the father of 10x thinking. Now think about that. 10x thinking. What we're talking about here is saying, I don't want to, progress in a meaningful way, to get 10% or to get 20% an increase or, 30%. I want 10 times. What's that? 1,000%? I want 1,000%. I want 10 times what I'm currently doing. And so this is what Dr. Michael Hewitt Gleason really focused on. And he worked with, now let me get back to Edward de Bono. He worked with Edward de Bono. Now, I'm not sure if anybody's heard of him, but he was a, extraordinary individual from Malta. I think he was from Malta. He was a physician, a psychologist, author, inventor, broadcaster. He invented lateral thinking. I think he was the father of lateral thinking, really. And he wrote so many books, I can't even think. He wrote books on psychology, thinking, and creativity. Mostly, they were the key areas he wrote on. But he didn't kind of confine himself to that. He talked across a great many subjects. Now, those who have been in the corporate sphere or beyond will most notably remember him for his book, 6 Thinking Hats. Now, that's 6 different kind of predominant styles of thinking, examining those styles. And I've done that many times. I'm not going to get into explaining that. I think if people want to research that, they can. But think 6 different styles of thinking. Now, I've done that in my corporate life to solve strategic problems, to solve product problems, to solve communication strategy challenges, all that sort of stuff. So I have used de Bono. But what Hewitt Gleason did was he worked with de Bono for a great many years. And then, of course, he branched out on his own and started to develop his own approach to thinking, which he, of course, calls the universal brain software. And he developed his own 10x school of thinking. He's one of the most notable speakers in Australia around the world. And so what I'd like to do today is focus on the first law of 10x thinking, right? I mean, that should stimulate everybody and inspire everybody right now. Okay, Glenn, tell me about the 10x thinking, right? And so I want to focus on the first law that was created by Michael. And by the way, I should tell you, where did I get all this stuff from Michael? I've met him and I've worked with him and I've done his course on 10x thinking. I've been in the school, I've done his 10x school of thinking. I've worked with him on universal brain software. So I didn't get this from books. I actually met him, paid a lot of money, by the way, to work with him and learnt all this stuff firsthand and could sit there and say, where did you come up with that? I mean, why would you arrive on that? Where did that come from? And, really question him on this stuff to get a deeper understanding of it for no other reason, right? And so being able to get his answers directly from him is such incredible stuff. So the first law of 10x thinking is what he calls the escape from CVS. CVS. So what is CVS? Well, the escape from the current version of the situation. CVS, the current version of the situation. And so I want to escape this current version of the situation and move to a BVS. What's the BVS? A better version of the situation. But interestingly, because he comes from the school of 10x thinking, his view of the BVS is that it's this. The BVS is 10 times the CVS. And so the formula is this: CVS by 10 equals BVS. And so I'm escaping from a CVS, which is my current version of the situation. I'm multiplying that by 10 to get to my BVS, which is my, he calls it the better version of the situation. I don't really understand that. Better. It's like extraordinary. It's ideal. I mean, we're 10 times better here. And so it's 10 times better. CVS by 10 equals BVS. So I'm escaping from CVS to get to a BVS, which is 10 times better than where I currently am. And so that's the first law, escape from BVS. And so really it's CVS to BVS. I'm escaping CVS to get to BVS. And so how do you do this, right? And so the way I do it is I just have a box on the left, a little box on the left, and I title it CVS. And so, I'll put this up on the screen. So a little box on the left is CVS. And in that CVS, what I'm doing is really thinking about this current version of the situation. Now, let me tell everybody, you cannot possibly solve a problem unless you define what the problem is or what the challenge is, right? I prefer to use the word challenge. What's the challenge? And so you cannot possibly solve a challenge and get to a 10 times better, situation, version of that, unless you define it really well. And so you've really got to go in. There's a lot of work involved in this, and I'm not going to, soft pedal this and say that it's really easy, because actually you have to get down and do a bit of work. And so what does that mean? Well, what's the current version of my situation around the context of what's challenging me? And so it's not the world, it's not the universe, the cosmos. What is it that's challenging me that I need to define, that I need to move past? And so you've got to actually really define that. And what I suggest people do is really write everything down. What are all the things that are challenging you in that situation? Then what I found the best way to do this is Michael's approach, by the way, as well, is to start to really create a synthesis of that, to be able to bring that down to, say, 3 or 4 concise bullet points. And so you've created the universe, and then what you're doing is, now let me simplify that down to the absolute core of the challenge, the absolute core that explains the CVS. And really, you want to do that in 3 to 4 concise bullet points. So then you can sit back and look at those bullet points and go, yep, that's it. That really concisely and simply defines what the CVS is, the current version of the situation. So now I've got it. And then once you've done that from, a thinking point of view, I want you to step back, get into, now we're back to intuition, right? Get into your intuitive state, into that alpha theta state, and use your intuition to provide you with some greater insight into the CVS. I mean, what's your intuition telling you about the CVS? And if you take the time to do that, it will tell you. And this potentially will provide you with greater insight into what the CVS is. So you're using, the thinking method, and you're using the intuitive method, and you're combining that to create those 3 to 4 concise bullet points as to what the CVS is. Now, there's your CVS. You've done the work around that. When you get really good at this stuff, you should be able to do it quite quickly, because, obviously, when you do it quite often, that's repetition. Repetition creates greater capability, of course. You improve your ability to do something through repetition. And so now we want to move over and look at the BVS. And remember, the BVS is a better version of the situation, but it's 10 times more. And you literally want to go through the same exercise. And the exercise is, well, what is a concise view of where I want to move towards? What's the ideal situation, the better version of the situation? A 10 times CVS to get to that BVS. And you basically go through the same thinking. You think it through, you write everything down, you then go into your intuitive state and get some more insights around what that looks like. You visualize it, you allow yourself to visualize it. And then you capture that again in 3 to 4 concise bullet points. And so now you've got the CVS, and you've got a line going over in the box there with 3 to 4 bullet points. And now you go over to the BVS, and you've got an understanding of where you're going to. And so this is classic strategic thinking, right? But it's a better version of it, I think. Where are we now? What's the current situation, and where are we going to? What's the challenge we need to overcome? Beautifully defined so that we can all understand it. And where do we want to go to? That is significantly better, 10 times better. And now we've defined that in really simple terms that everybody can understand. 3 to 4 bullet points over here, CVS, 3 to 4 bullet points over here, BVS. And now, what are we going to do to get there? Well, you've got to, I usually put a box down underneath, and I'll show that on the screen as well. And that is the plan. And so the plan is what actions I'm going to take to get me to escape the CVS and to get to the BVS, which is 10 times the CVS. And so we've really got to sit down and think about that. Now, the way that I do the plan is I literally do the thinking approach again. Just think of the obvious things that I think, could possibly be the things that I need to do, the actions, just call them strategies, call them tactics, whatever you like, that I need to take to get to the BVS. And so I just write that stuff down first. And then again with the intuition. Now, what I always find is the intuition provides me with much better actions. Because again, I'm moving out of dead thinking and into live thinking, much better actions to get to the BVS. And so once I go through that synthesis again of thinking, where I take it from the bigger picture and I've written everything down, and I start to get down to, what are the 3 or 4 things that I've got to do that will take me on the straightest, most efficient, most effective line of action to get to my BVS, which of course is 10 times my CVS. And so that there, Michelle, is the first law of 10x thinking, and it is escaping the CVS, the current version of the situation, and using that little universal brain software, that simple little method. It's a simple little method. And you know what? I do it for everything. I've kind of got this model where I just, I've got this big pad and a big fat pencil, and I just draw the box on the left CVS, draw the box on the right BVS, draw the box underneath the plan, and then I sit down and do the work on the CVS. And then I sit down, 3 or 4 bullet points. Then I sit down and do the work on the BVS. What's that look like? Now I'm really excited, right? I'm excited what that BVS is looking like. And I'm going to get even more excited when I develop a plan of action to get there. And so then I go underneath and do that work again. What do I think? The obvious things I can do. Remember, the plan of action has got to be up to the BVS. I mean, it can't be little steps. You've kind of got to be bold. You've got to, be a little fearless. You've got to take... you've got to assess your risk and be willing to take some risk inside that plan, because remember, the outcome is 10 times. And so you can't, do tiny little actions and, believe that you can do little steps to get to a 10 times outcome. It just doesn't work like that. If you want a multiple of 10, you've got to kind of take bold actions. You've got to be a bit fearless, right? And we need that. Leaders actually need that. And so trusting your intuition to say, what am I going to do? How am I going to get there? And write it down. And then you can say, then on one sheet of paper, I've got my CVS, I've got my BVS, and I've got my plan. It's on one sheet of paper. 3 to 4 bullet points, 3 to 4 bullet points, 3 to 4 bullet points down there in the plan. And then, then guess what? I've got to execute, which means I've got to, put any fear aside, put anything aside of what anybody's saying. I developed this and I'm going to go ahead and do it, and then go make it happen. Really get into it, make it happen. And, I want to finish this little session with a quote, one of my favorite quotes. Where is it? Now, a lot of people misattribute this quote because now I'm talking about action, right? I'm talking about taking action. A lot of people misattribute this quote to somebody else like Goethe or somebody. It's actually William H. Murray. Let me read this quote to you. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favour all manner of unforeseen incidents, meetings, and material assistance, which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. Whatever you do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. William H. Murray. And so when you've got that plan, begin it now. Don't wait. And so there you go, Michelle. That's the escape from CVS. That's the universal brain software. That's the 10x school of thinking, the CVS to BVS. That's what I wanted to talk about in the video today.
Excellent. Thank you. I do have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
I'd love to have your questions.
Well, I want to go back to the beginning of your talk on this subject. And you talked about linear and lateral minds, and you did, or brain, and you did explain linear, but you did, would you please explain the lateral mind?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's been, I've done a number of different kind of assessments around this stuff. And what they do is they have a tendency to, segment the brain into 4 sections or 2 hemispheres or whatever. Your brain doesn't actually think like that, but I think it's a good way of explaining how the brain could work. And so what they've worked out, and there's a thing called the HBDI, if I remember correctly, the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument, which kind of, when you go through all this assessment, and, I'm not really very big on assessments. I don't like assessments, but it kind of gives you a little bit of an insight into, your predisposition for thinking. And so, there's a lot of people who are accountants or who are lawyers who have a tendency to be left brain thinking. So left brain thinking is what I talked about. It's sequential, it's numeric, it's logical, it's rational. It's this whole kind of rationalist approach. In many respects, it's what humanity has been taught to do, which is incredibly limiting. And then, of course, they talk about right brain thinking. And right brain thinking is very visionary. It's very creative. It's very imaginative, right? It's very front, neocortex front of your brain thinking, where you create, imaginate. You start to, remember what back to Einstein again, remember what he said about imagination. It's more important than anything. It's more important than creativity. And so, creativity actually stems from your ability to imagine things. So, if you go back to the universal brain software, it's imagining a 10 times better outcome than my CVS. And so that's using your imagination to look into that, potential and not restrict yourself, and really go to 10 times more and say, what does that look like? And so the right brain, the right hemisphere thinking is really visionary, creative, imaginative, big picture kind of outcomes stuff, and so that's what that is. And it's interesting, when I did the HBDI, I was off the charts on the right hemisphere, as you could imagine, right? And so my left hemisphere was, I had no predisposition to really think over there. And so that's why when I sat down with my CFO, the chief financial officer, I'd go, oh, here we go, balance sheets, profit and loss, going through all this stuff. I don't like it, and she'd say, oh, let me make it simple for you. And we got it to a point where I could do that. But really what I'd love to do was say, what can we think of that is going to solve this problem? What's the big picture? It's like the other day I said to Brownie, how many people have we got on our YouTube channel? And he said this many. And I went, well, wouldn't it be great to just have a couple of million? I mean, why don't we just work towards a couple of million, 3, 5, 10? Because the work we're doing here at the collective is just so extraordinary in terms of personal sovereignty and financial sovereignty working together. It's everybody should know this stuff at least, and so, that's the big picture. And he kind of looked at me and I went, don't worry about it, man. We can do it. I think we can do it. And so that's me going into the top right hemisphere of my right brain, going completely visual and thinking big picture. Why not? And so that's the way that works. Did you have another question?
Okay, so that means, literal is left and lateral is right. Is that
in a very simplistic sense?
Right. Okay.
Right.
Very good. Okay. The other question was, can you give us an example of CVS to BBS? I know
not
do it.
Yeah, not something that's easy to do. I haven't got I haven't got, here's the cake I made earlier. But I can say this, I apply it to everything. And so, if I've got a challenge with, some of the work I'm doing in a specific area, I'll just sit down and go, well, what is challenging me? And everybody knows, you know, it could be an aspect of their life. It could be their relationships, their love life. It could be a financial situation where they want to be able to make more money, or it could be around a knowledge deficit, you know, where they say, I just don't know enough about this subject. How am I going to, what am I going to do there? It could be a sales manager who's got a HR problem with staff, you know, constant staff turnover. How do I solve this staff turnover? It could be, you know, I've done this for, you know, when I've sat down and looked at, in my corporate life, looked at my financials and said, well, I've got a 5% profitability ratio to revenue. That's not enough. What am I going to do to that? So what's the CVS versus the BVS on that specific thing? So it's a matter of kind of looking at things in your life that you're challenged by. It could be, you know, your mental progression, your physical, you know, it could be, how do I get fitter? How do I lose weight? I mean, it could be as simple as something as simple as that. How do I actually, you know, lose 10 kilos? And so you sit down and say, what's the CVS? And the CVS will talk about, you know, how you sleep. It will talk about what you're eating. It'll talk about how you're exercising, you know, all these things that contribute to the situation that you're currently in. And then what you'll do, look at the BVS and say, well, the BVS really is, you know, I'm eating a much better diet that's more attuned to my body type or my blood type or whatever. You know, I'm exercising in a way that's more attuned to me burning more calories than I'm consuming. I'm sleeping in a way, I'm monitoring my sleep pattern so I get really good rest. I'm getting enough sun. I'm getting enough, immersion in nature. You know, I'm reading I'm taking in the right information, not all the, you know, the rubbishy stuff, and so on, right? And so your BVS looks like that. And then what's your plan to get there? Well, you know, I'm going to hire a personal trainer. I'm going to, make sure that I train 4 times a week for 45 minutes. And I'm going to schedule that into my diary. I'm going to make sure that when I go to the supermarket, I have a list, and I make sure I don't buy anything that's not on that list, because I've thought about the list, and the list is organic produce, or the list is, you know, whatever. And so I'm going to, you know, do that. And so, and then, you know, that's the planning, that's the CVS. Yeah, and you might say, well, you know, as a guy, I might say, well, I'm 120 kilos. And so I'm, you know, 30 kilos overweight for my height and body type or whatever. And so I'm making this stuff up, by the way, just to give an example. But you might say, well, I want to lose 30 kilograms in 6 months. How am I going to do that? And so the BVS is to lose 30 kilograms inside 6 months. You know, the current thing is this: I don't feel good. I don't sleep well. I don't think well. I don't function well. I look in the mirror. I don't like my image, what I've allowed myself to get to. And so the BVS is, I look in the mirror, I feel fantastic. My skin is cleared up. My body is in a shape that is more like when I was 22 years old, you know, blah, 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 right, whatever. And so, you know, and I'm 30 kilograms lighter, and I'm fitter, and I'm stronger, I'm sharper, I'm smarter. Everything works better, you know, no pain. None of that stuff. And so now what's my plan to do that? And so you've got to do a bit of research around what best works for you. Every individual is different, right? There's no formulaic approach to this. So, you know, for example, with me, I have a tendency to eat for my blood type. My blood type is A. And so what's the eating for that blood type? Mostly vegetarian. And so when I eat mostly vegetarian, I don't eat any red meat at all. I don't drink any alcohol at all. Right. And so what I found is no alcohol and no red meat works really well for my body type. And so when I first did that, you know, I lost literally 8 kilograms in the first two or 3 weeks. It just fell off me. It was extraordinary. And so, you know, that was the kind of changes. That was a really good thing. I was sleeping better. I can think better. I get up earlier in the morning. I'm meditating. You know, all of these things became my kind of my plan to be able to get to where I wanted to get to. Now, for everybody, it's going to be a bit different. And as I said, it could be health and well-being. It could be relationships. It could be a specific challenge in business. It could be a specific knowledge deficit or skills deficit or capabilities deficit or whatever. And so, yeah. How's that?
Well, you just made a beautiful cake. Thank you very much.
Good.
You didn't have one prepared, but you just made one, and that answered my question.
Made it up on the spot.
You did, and that's great. So, well, thanks for another great lesson in sovereign conscious leadership, Glen. Please subscribe, like, and share so we can assist in building the leaders of tomorrow. And thank you for watching.
Yes, and do that. And I just want to mention to people that I do have my conscious leadership program that's available to all members of the collective and everybody else for that matter. And I've got a link below. So jump in there. It's a 3-stage online course that will help you to, move from your current CVS to your BVS, from, to elevate your self-awareness, expand your consciousness, and to help you to discover your true higher source self, to answer those questions, those primordial questions: who am I and why am I here? And all that in the context of what conscious leadership is. So I'm going to put the link below. Please jump in, take advantage of that program, join the collective, join us here on this journey of elevating our consciousness, of becoming sovereign conscious leaders, to be able to move beyond the event and to work on rebuilding humanity. That's why we're here.
Exactly. Glen, did you want to mention about the Tuesday night Zoom session?
Oh, yes. On Tuesday
November
night.
22. So this is current now.
Yeah. As a member of Join the Collective, if you're not a member of the collective, but join the collective, and you'll find that every Tuesday night, it's 6 p.m. Brisbane time, 7 p.m. Sydney time, where I'm based. And then 7 p.m., that's the Q&A, and then 7 p.m. Brisbane time, and where we go into the conscious leadership session, where we're really focusing in on how we can help people to become sovereign conscious leaders. And again, let me throw this in, because we want a planet. The collective is really interested in every single member of humanity to be a sovereign conscious leaders. And that's, at last count, around about 8 billion people. We would love to be sovereign conscious leaders. We would have a very different planet.
It'd be beautiful.
It would be beautiful.
Okay. Well, thank you very much again, Glen, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Michelle. Onward and upward.